Hello everyone, my name is Suzan Naz Uzel. I work as a policy officer at REVOLVE. Today we are joined by MEP Thomas Pellerin-Carlin at the European Parliament to discuss the key decarbonisation solutions for Europe, his co-proposed social leasing scheme, and the Cleantech Friendship Group he recently co-launched at the European Parliament. Mr. Pellerin-Carlin, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to.
Decarbonizing the heating and cooling sector is essential to achieving the EU's energy and climate goals. You've stated that heat pumps, especially when combined with renewable energy, present a tangible and ready-to-use solution. They could also help reduce energy poverty. However, their deployment requires strong action at the European level. What steps do you believe should be taken?
First, we need to understand the role that heat pumps can play. They can play a role in the industry, but also when it comes to buildings. And it is key because 40% of our energy is being consumed inside buildings. And this is mostly for space heating and water heating. And here heat pumps can play a big part of the solution. And that's why it is really essential that we design a policy that allows everyone in Europe who is able to be able to choose the type of heat pump that suits them best. One element that is critical in order to do that is to make sure that we can restore confidence of European companies and European families into the fact that electricity prices in Europe will be stable and reasonable for the future. That is key to make sure that we can have people that can switch from oil energy and gas energy to electricity, including in the case of heat pumps, because those are electricity-powered heat pumps.
And wind energy is a major source of clean and affordable electricity, currently providing over 20% of Europe's power. Yet the sector faces challenges such as slow deployment, fragmented policies, and unfair global competition. How are you addressing these issues within the ITRE committee?
The first element is to make sure that we can create demand. We live in this European Parliament in a world where everybody talks about electrification as if this was something that was happening. It's not really the case. When you look at electricity demand over time in Europe, it has been declining rather than increasing. And that is obviously something that is bad for all electricity generators, but also especially the clean electricity generators that we want to develop, like wind power, but also other technologies that are relevant. And this is why it is really important not only to promote heat pumps, but in the sector of mobility, that we have a bunch of policies, let's say a good articulation of policies that allow people to switch from oil-powered mobility to electricity-powered mobility, whether we're talking about two-wheelers, whether we're talking about cars, or whether we are even talking about trucks. And that is one key element to make sure that there is demand for electricity now and in the future, and that will support all electricity generators, including the wind power companies. And in the specific case of wind power, we need really to make sure that we have an investment framework that is conducive to European manufacturers investing in Europe. Part of that has to do with our trade defense mechanisms. We risk seeing Europe being the dumping ground for Chinese equipment that can no longer go to the US market because of Donald J. Trump's policies. We need to have trade defense mechanism to make sure that this does not happen. And on top of that, we need to have an investment framework that allows our European manufacturers to have access to the type of support they need. For wind power, we don't need to spend money through subsidies necessarily. We can be smart, having two-sided contract for difference for projects at the project level, but also having the European Investment Bank playing a bigger role with loans, guarantees, and counter-guarantees to make sure that the European wind power industry can invest in Europe in a way that looks at the long-term future, because they are a vital element of our present, but also future industrial base.
You proposed the European Social Leasing Scheme together with Polish Minister Bolesta, advocating for the affordability and accessibility of small electric cars, especially since cars remain the main mode of transport for hundreds of millions of Europeans. In your view, could this initiative effectively help tackle transport poverty?
Yes, 100% yes, and it is actually the raison d'être of that proposal. Currently, we live in a European new car market that is quite bizarre, to be frank. Who buys a new car in Europe? First, companies. But when it comes to the individual people that are buying a new car, the typical buyer is someone who is in the top third of the income distribution. So someone who is actually quite rich, who can actually afford to buy a new car, and a big one. Western European. There are more new cars sold in Belgium than in Poland, even if Poland has a much bigger population. And people that actually, let's say, not the youngest. The average car buyer, for instance, the average age of the car buyer is usually in the late 50s. So people that are just about to go to pension. What the European Social Leasing Scheme is trying to do is to make electric cars accessible for the people that actually need it. And therefore, that framework is targeting the people that are at the bottom half of the income distribution. So in other words, people that earn less than the median wage, which will be around 2,000 euros per month in France. It will be obviously different in Poland and in other countries. It is also targeting the people that live geographically far away from their place of work. So for instance, saying that this is to the benefit of the people that need to do 15 kilometers between their home and their workplace. So really focusing on rural and peri-urban Europeans. And if you do that, we also know from a small French experiment that was done in January 2024, that is actually very helpful for the younger generation. Of the people that benefited from the French social leasing scheme experiment, the average age is actually people in their 30s. So people who start to have kids, which is a moment where obviously they need support to be able to do the kind of investment, including into an electric car, to be able to drive the kid around to school, and the kind of leisure activities that goes with being a parent. How it would work in the end, we have the EU issuing a template, with also pitching in with some EU funding through the already existing Social Climate Fund. And at the end of the day, the objective is for working men and women in Europe to be able to have access to an electric car, not because they're going to buy it, because they can't find 30,000 euros to buy a new car, but because they're going to pay a monthly rent of that car that would be subsidized and therefore quite low. Here we're talking about a rent that will be between 50 and 150 euros per month. And that's really the way we can make small electric cars accessible for the working people in Europe.
And you recently co-launched the Cleantech Friendship Group, an initiative aimed at highlighting the importance of clean tech for Europe, comprising over 30 MEPs. The European Commission also supports the promotion of clean technologies and fostering a more sustainable and competitive EU economy. How do you plan to support these ambitions through this group?
The clean tech revolution is one of the most important economic revolutions for Europe. What did we do 20 years ago when there was the tech revolution, the digital revolution? We dragged our feet. We did far too little on regulation, far too little on the single market, far too little in investment. And now we live in a world where almost everything digital in Europe is foreign. And we either rely on the US or on China. We don't have a single significant European manufacturer of digital equipment. We don't have a single manufacturer of smartphones or even of the apps that we use in our daily life. Virtually all of them are either Chinese or American. Europe cannot afford to do the same mistake on clean tech, on wind power, on battery. If we fail on clean tech the way we failed on tech, then we're just going to be a museum for Chinese tourists and American tourists if they still agree to come and visit us from time to time. This is essential. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, gets it. She understands that. And to be effective, we have created a Cleantech Friendship Group to be able to have MEPs that also understand the historic importance of cleantech and are able to work together to deliver concrete policy changes when it comes to EU funding, when it comes to EU regulation, when it comes to the cleantech single market. And that's why we've created that. I'm one of the two co-founders. I'm a social democrat from France. I'm working with Lidia Pereira, who is an excellent member of the European Parliament from the center-right, from the EPP. She's from Portugal. And together we have a group of more than 30 MEPs coming from all over Europe, from 5 different political groups. and we are working together to make sure that we can rise up to history, rise up to the moment, and be able to deliver the clean tech policies we need to make sure that our clean tech investors, our workers, our entrepreneurs, our researchers can play their role in making sure that we Europeans become the global clean tech leader. Because more than ever, we need to be the leader of the free world, not only in diplomacy or in trade, but also when it comes to the types of technologies that will be able to preserve freedom in the 21st century. Clean tech technologies are obviously a big part of that.
Today we discussed some of the key decarbonization solutions for Europe, Mr. Pellerin-Carlin's social leasing scheme, and the Cleantech Friendship Group he initiated at the Parliament, co-initiated. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time, for the insightful remarks.